The electronic pulse that preceded the Zorn's arrival was more than just a communication disruption. It was a surgical strike against humanity's digital nervous system. While Jack Chen deciphered the underlying patterns, thousands of miles away, a different kind of resistance was taking shape. In the remote mountains of Afghanistan, a former Special Forces operator named Rashid Khan watched the first alien ships materialize through a pair of high-precision optical sensors. Unlike most military personnel who would report through official channels, Rashid had spent years developing an alternative communication network, a mesh of satellite links, underground repeaters, and encrypted communication protocols that could survive even the most sophisticated jamming attempts. His fingers danced across a custom-built interface, a device that looked more like a technological nightmare than a communication tool. Each module was salvaged from different systems: military-grade encryption chips, satellite phone components, and experimental quantum communication prototypes he'd collected during years of covert operations. The first transmission went out not to military headquarters, but to a carefully curated network of individuals Jack Chen wouldn't know existed: hackers, researchers, engineers, and freethinkers from every corner of the globe. People who had been marginalized by traditional systems, but possessed extraordinary capabilities. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, Dr. Yuki Tanaka monitored the situation from a classified research station. Her work on adaptive neural networks had always been considered too radical by mainstream scientific communities. Now those same networks were processing alien communication patterns faster than any government supercomputer. "It's not just an invasion," she muttered to herself, watching holographic displays flicker with complex data streams. "It's a probe, a test." The alien ships weren't simply destroying infrastructure, they were studying humanity's response. Each targeted strike seemed calculated to reveal something about human capabilities, human weaknesses, but they had gravely miscalculated the depth of human resilience. In Lagos, a collective of young tech entrepreneurs transformed their startup incubator into an impromptu war room. What the Zorn didn't understand was that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its military might, but in its ability to rapidly innovate under pressure. Kiyamaka Okonkwo, a 28-year-old quantum computing specialist, had been working on a theoretical framework for adaptive communication systems. Her prototype, initially designed to help rural communities overcome communication barriers, now became a potential weapon against the alien invasion. "We're not just going to defend," she told her team, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos of their makeshift operations center. "We're going to understand." Meanwhile, in the high-security research facilities of the European Space Agency, Dr. Heinrich Müller reviewed the first spectroscopic analysis of the alien ships. Traditional scanning methods revealed nothing. The vessels seemed to exist in a state that defied current understanding of physics. But Müller had a secret. Years of theoretical work on quantum entanglement and nonlinear dimensional physics suggested something extraordinary. The alien technology wasn't just advanced, it was fundamentally different from anything humanity had conceived. Back in Silicon Valley, Jack Chen's fingers moved with a surgeon's precision. The network disruption wasn't random. It was a complex symphony of electronic signals, each pulse carrying multiple layers of information. To the untrained eye, it looked like chaos. To Jack, it was a language waiting to be decoded. A secure communication channel pinged. It was a message from Rashid Khan, encrypted with a protocol Jack had helped develop years ago during a classified project that was supposed to have been permanently shelved. "Something's different," the message read. "They're not here to conquer. They're here to evaluate." The pieces were starting to come together. The Zorn hadn't just chosen Earth randomly. This was a calculated assessment, a test of humanity's potential. And humanity was about to prove that potential in ways the aliens could never have anticipated. In orbit, the alien ships continued their silent observation. They were hunting for weakness, for predictability. They would find neither. Humanity was awakening, not as a collection of nations, but as a single interconnected organism. and the universe was about to witness something unprecedented. The first wave of Zorn attacks exposed a truth about humanity that no galactic civilization had ever witnessed. Survival was not just an instinct, but an art form. In the smoldering ruins of Mexico City, Maria Rodriguez, a former emergency room nurse turned urban survival instructor, orchestrated something remarkable. As alien ground forces moved through the devastated streets, her network of survivors transformed the city into a living, breathing trap. Underground tunnels, originally designed for utility maintenance, became a labyrinthine defense system. Construction workers, subway engineers, and local maintenance crews who knew every inch of the city's subterranean infrastructure became the first line of unconventional defense. They rerouted water systems to create sudden flooding, manipulated electrical grids to create electromagnetic interference, and used architectural knowledge to create collapsing pathways that would confuse and decimate alien ground units. Halfway across the world, in the dense urban landscape of Seoul, a different kind of resistance emerged. Dr. Park Jae-yun, a brilliant robotics engineer, had spent years developing autonomous rescue and construction robots. Now those same machines became instruments of guerrilla warfare. Her prototype swarm robotic system, initially designed for disaster response, proved devastatingly effective against the alien ground forces. Each robot was more than a machine. It was a learning node in a vast, distributed intelligence network. They moved with an unpredictability that completely undermined the Zorn's tactical algorithms. "They're trying to understand our patterns," Dr. Park muttered, watching the real-time feed from her mobile command center. "So we'll give them chaos." The robots didn't just fight. They collected data, adapted, and transmitted information back to a global network of resistance fighters. Each encounter with the alien forces became a learning opportunity, a chance to understand their weaknesses. In the Australian outback, a group of indigenous trackers and environmental scientists brought their millennia-old survival skills to the conflict. Led by David Munro, an expert in extreme environment survival, they understood something the alien invaders could not comprehend. Harmony with an environment was the ultimate survival strategy. They didn't just resist, they transformed the landscape itself into a weapon. Using intimate knowledge of local ecosystems, they manipulated natural systems to create defensive barriers. Salt flats became electrical conductance zones, desert winds were channeled to create disorienting dust storms, and native flora was used to create biological interference fields that disrupted alien sensors. Aboard the primary Zorn command ship, Captain Krellax watched the unfolding chaos with growing confusion. The tactical models suggested complete human capitulation within hours. Instead, each human response was a complete deviation from expected behavior. "They're not fighting," one of Krellax's subordinates noted. "They're evolving." The global communication network that the Zorn had initially disabled became humanity's greatest strength. What appeared to be destruction was actually a forced reconfiguration. Traditional communication infrastructures were replaced by mesh networks, satellite alternatives, and communication methods that didn't rely on centralized systems. Amateur radio operators, satellite hobbyists, and underground communication experts became critical nodes in a new distributed intelligence network. Information flowed like water, finding paths where conventional systems would have failed. In the Arctic research stations, a team of climate scientists turned their environmental monitoring equipment into advanced sensor arrays. They weren't just tracking climate changes anymore. They were mapping alien movement patterns, analyzing energy signatures, and creating predictive models that could anticipate Zorn's strategic movements. Dr. Elena Volkov, standing in her temperature-controlled research hub, realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. "This isn't an invasion," she told her team. "It's a first-contact scenario gone catastrophically wrong." The Zorn had expected a linear conflict, a straightforward conquest. Instead, they encountered a species that didn't just adapt, but transformed entire systemic paradigms in real time. As alien ground units pushed into urban centers, they discovered that every street, every building, every piece of infrastructure was potentially a weapon. Humanity wasn't just defending, it was reimagining the entire concept of resistance. In the skies above, in the underground networks, in remote research stations, and in the hearts of millions of individuals, a new type of warfare was being invented. Not a war of weapons, but a war of imagination, of systemic thinking, of collective intelligence. The Zorn had come seeking a straightforward conquest. They would leave having discovered something far more dangerous, a species that could turn limitation into innovation, chaos into strategy, and invasion into an opportunity for collective evolution. The breakthrough didn't happen in a pristine laboratory or a government research facility. It emerged from the most unexpected of places, a makeshift workshop beneath a refugee center in Buenos Aires, where Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked alongside survivors who had become her most unlikely collaborators. Dr. Imani Okeke, a Nigerian theoretical physicist who had been working as a volunteer technician, noticed something peculiar about the quantum entanglement experiments. What appeared to be random interference was actually a complex communication pattern, a language of quantum states that defied conventional understanding. It's not just about manipulation, Imani explained to Elena, her fingers tracing holographic representations of quantum interactions. It's about communication at the most fundamental level of existence. Their team was a mosaic of displaced brilliance. There was Victor, a Russian quantum engineer who had lost everything in the initial attacks. Sofia, a Chilean computer scientist who had been developing adaptive neural networks before the invasion. Marco, a Brazilian materials scientist who saw the quantum research as humanity's last hope. They weren't just developing a weapon. They were deciphering an entirely new form of technological interaction. In a parallel research effort, Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura in Tokyo had been studying something entirely different. His life's work on biomimetic systems, technologies inspired by biological processes, suddenly took on a critical importance. The Zorn's technology seemed to have organic components that behaved more like living systems than mechanical constructs. Nakamura's breakthrough came from an unlikely source. A collection of deep-sea organism samples he had been studying before the invasion revealed quantum communication methods that mirrored what the team in Buenos Aires was discovering. Marine organisms had been using quantum-level communication for millions of years, a fact humanity was only now beginning to understand. The quantum disruptor wasn't just a weapon. It was a translation device, a means of understanding a form of communication that existed beyond human perception. Deep in the Canadian wilderness, a group of indigenous knowledge keepers worked alongside quantum physicists. Their traditional understanding of interconnectedness, a concept that had been dismissed as mystical for centuries, provided critical insights into quantum entanglement. Elder Sarah Two Rivers explained it in terms that bridged scientific and traditional knowledge. Everything is connected, she told the research team. What you call quantum entanglement, we have always known as the web of life. Their contributions revealed something profound. The Zorn's technology was fundamentally different from human technology. It wasn't just advanced, it was alive in a way that defied human understanding of technology and biology. The research center became a crucible of human potential. Refugees became research assistants. Survivors became critical thinkers. The traditional barriers of academic discipline, national origin, and professional hierarchy dissolved in the face of an existential threat. Dr. Rodriguez's team discovered that the quantum disruptor could do more than disable alien technology. It could communicate with it. Each pulse was a question, a probe into the fundamental nature of the alien systems. We're not just fighting, Elena told her team during a late-night strategy session. We're learning a new language of existence. The first successful test came unexpectedly. A small prototype, no larger than a briefcase, sent out a quantum pulse that momentarily froze a section of alien communications grid. But it was more than a disruption. It was a moment of quantum dialogue. Aboard the Zorn command ship, Captain Krelax experienced something unprecedented. The quantum pulse wasn't just an attack. It was a form of communication that penetrated the very fabric of their technological consciousness. For the first time, the Zorn realized they were dealing with a species that could think and communicate beyond linear technological paradigms. The quantum research team had discovered something that would change everything. Technology wasn't just a tool. It was a living, adaptive language of interaction. The Zorn had come expecting to find a primitive species. Instead, they had awakened a civilization on the brink of a technological transformation. Humanity was learning to speak a language of existence that most of the universe had yet to comprehend. And this was just the beginning. The true arsenal of humanity wasn't found in military stockpiles or government research facilities. It emerged in the spaces between. Refugee camps, community centers, abandoned factories, and underground workshops where survival met creativity. In the slums of Kibera, Nairobi, a collective of street engineers had transformed urban waste into a sophisticated early warning system. Discarded smartphones, solar panels, and electronic components became a network of sensors that could detect alien movement patterns with uncanny precision. Led by Akinyi Odhiambo, a 24-year-old self-taught electronics genius, they turned urban poverty into an unexpected strength. "We've always known how to survive with nothing," Akinyi told her team, soldering together a device that looked like a mad scientist's fever dream. "Now we're going to show them how we fight." Their system wasn't just defensive. Each piece of captured alien technology became a learning opportunity. They reverse-engineered communication frequencies, studied energy signatures, and developed adaptive camouflage techniques that could make entire city blocks virtually invisible to alien sensors. Halfway across the world, in the Australian outback, a different kind of resistance was taking shape. A network of off-grid communities, long accustomed to surviving in extreme conditions, became the backbone of a decentralized manufacturing revolution. Solar-powered fabrication labs, originally designed for remote community development, now churned out custom-designed defensive technologies. Jack Mulligan, a former mining engineer, had developed a series of electromagnetic pulse generators using components from agricultural equipment, satellite dishes, and repurposed industrial machinery. These weren't military-grade weapons. They were survival tools that could temporarily disable alien technology across entire regions. In the mountains of Peru, an indigenous engineering collective led by Maria Quisp developed something extraordinary. Drawing from traditional textile technologies and modern material science, they created adaptive camouflage systems that could dynamically alter their electromagnetic and thermal signatures. "Our ancestors survived conquistadors," Maria explained, watching a fabric that could shift its appearance and energy signature in real time. "We know how to become invisible when needed." The global resistance wasn't a centralized effort. It was a living, breathing organism of innovation. In abandoned shopping malls, converted warehouses, and makeshift workshops, people were reimagining what technology could be. A group of Korean game developers turned their understanding of complex systems and user interaction into sophisticated drone coordination algorithms. What began as multiplayer game design became a method for coordinating autonomous defense systems that could think and adapt faster than any centralized command structure. In the flooded coastal regions of Bangladesh, climate change survivors had developed advanced water management technologies that now became critical for creating defensive environments. They could redirect water flows, create electromagnetic interference through carefully designed hydraulic systems, and transform entire landscapes into adaptive defensive networks. Rashid Khan's communication network became the nervous system of this global workshop. Information, design specifications, and breakthrough technologies moved like water, finding paths of least resistance, adapting, spreading. The Zorn had expected a linear conflict with predictable responses. Instead, they encountered a species that could turn limitation into innovation with breathtaking speed. A workshop in Cape Town developed adaptive body armor using principles from deep-sea creature exoskeletons, A collective in Montreal created quantum communication jammers using recycled telecommunications equipment. In India, a group of agricultural engineers developed biological interference fields that could disrupt alien sensor technologies. Each innovation was a middle finger to the concept of technological determinism. Humanity wasn't just fighting, it was reimagining the very concept of technology. Captain Krelax watched the data streams with growing confusion. The human response defied every predictive model. It was as if the entire species had become a single adaptive organism, each individual a potential point of innovation, each community a potential battlefield. The alien invasion had made a critical miscalculation. They had come expecting to find a hierarchical, centralized civilization. Instead, they had awakened a global network of creative problem solvers who saw every challenge as an opportunity for reinvention. Humanity's true weapon wasn't any single technology. It was the ability to transform, to adapt, to see possibility where others saw only limitation. And they were just getting started. The Global Defense Initiative was never a military operation in the traditional sense. It was an unprecedented experiment in human potential, a living, breathing organism of collective intelligence that emerged from the most unlikely of origins. Dr. Amira Hassan, the initiative's unexpected architect, had been a conflict resolution specialist before the invasion. Her background wasn't in military strategy, but in understanding how diverse human systems could work together. Standing in the converted underground research facility beneath the Atacama Desert, she watched as the most complex collaborative effort in human history took shape. The facility itself was a testament to human ingenuity. Powered by a combination of geothermal energy, solar arrays, and experimental quantum energy collectors, it was designed to be invisible, not just to alien detection systems, but to traditional satellite surveillance. Every system was redundant, every communication channel was adaptive, every resource was recycled and repurposed. In the communication hub, a team of linguists worked alongside quantum physicists and artificial intelligence experts. Their mission was nothing short of impossible: to develop a communication framework that could potentially bridge the gap between human and alien cognitive processes. Dr. Yuki Tanaka's neural network mapping project had taken an unexpected turn. By studying the communication patterns of complex biological systems, from neural networks in the human brain to the intricate communication systems of ant colonies and mycelial networks, they were developing a new approach to understanding alien intelligence. "We're not trying to translate," Yuki explained to her team. "We're trying to understand the fundamental principles of communication itself." Nearby, a group of anthropologists, game theorists, and evolutionary biologists worked on something equally critical. They were developing predictive models that could anticipate alien decision-making processes by understanding the evolutionary pressures that might have shaped their civilization. The initiative's most radical approach was its leadership structure. There was no central command in the traditional sense. Instead, a dynamic, fluid network of expertise emerged. Leaders would rise based on immediate necessity, with decision-making authority flowing like water to the most appropriate point of intervention. In the medical research wing, Dr. Carlos Rodriguez was leading a team that was redefining human biological potential. They weren't just developing medical treatments, they were exploring how human physiology could be enhanced to survive in increasingly challenging environments. Their research drew from an unprecedented range of sources: indigenous healing practices, extreme environment survival techniques, cutting-edge genetic research, and emerging understanding of human neuroplasticity were combined in ways that would have been impossible before the invasion. A team of deep-sea researchers had discovered something extraordinary. Studying extremophile organisms that survived in the most inhospitable environments on Earth, they were developing biological adaptation techniques that could potentially protect humans from previously unimaginable environmental challenges. The Psychological Warfare Division was equally innovative. Led by Dr. Aisha Okonkwo, they were developing communication strategies that went far beyond traditional intelligence gathering. They were attempting to understand the psychological and cultural foundations of the alien civilization, not to defeat them, but to find potential points of mutual understanding. War is a failure of communication, Aisha would often say. Our job is to prevent that failure. Quantum communication experts worked alongside xenolinguists, creating communication protocols that could potentially bridge not just language barriers, but fundamental differences in cognitive processing. In the training facilities, traditional military training had been completely reimagined. Soldiers were now part-time researchers, engineers were combat strategists, and every individual was trained in multiple disciplines. The line between civilian and military had completely dissolved. Captain Rashid Khan's global communication network had become the nervous system of this new approach. Information flowed like a living organism, adaptive, self-healing, impossible to completely disrupt. The Zorn had expected a hierarchical, predictable response. Instead, they encountered a civilization that could reorganize itself faster than any external force could comprehend. As the alien ships continued their observation, they were witnessing something unprecedented. Humanity wasn't just preparing for a conflict. It was evolving in real time, transforming its very understanding of collective potential. The Global Defense Initiative was more than a military operation. It was a laboratory of human possibility, a glimpse of what humanity could become when pushed to its absolute limits. And they were just beginning to understand their own potential. The art of psychological warfare wasn't about destruction, it was about understanding. Dr. Lena Petrov stood before a holographic display that looked more like an abstract painting than a strategic map. A former performance artist turned cognitive neuroscientist, she had assembled a team that defied every conventional understanding of psychological operations. Their primary weapon was empathy, a concept so alien to the Zorn that it became their most potent form of disruption. In a converted music studio in Berlin, a group of linguists, musicians, and quantum communication experts worked on something unprecedented. They were developing communication signatures that weren't just messages, but complex emotional landscapes. Each transmission was a carefully crafted symphony of linguistic, emotional, and quantum-level communications. Mahira Khan, a synesthesia researcher from Karachi, had discovered something extraordinary. Her studies on individuals who could perceive sound as color, emotions as physical sensations, provided unexpected insights into alternative forms of communication. The team realized that language wasn't just about words, it was about creating entire experiential landscapes. "We're not trying to communicate," Mahira explained, her fingers dancing across a complex interface that translated emotional states into quantum communication signatures. "We're trying to create a shared experience." Meanwhile, in the high-altitude research stations of the Andes, a team of anthropologists and cognitive scientists were studying something remarkable. Indigenous communities with centuries of oral tradition had developed communication methods that could convey complex multi-generational narratives in ways that transcended linear language. Dr. Elena Rodriguez collaborated with Elder Maria Quisp, combining quantum communication techniques with traditional storytelling methods. They discovered that human narrative structures could create cognitive dissonance in the Zorn's collective consciousness, a form of psychological interference that went beyond traditional information warfare. The psychological warfare team wasn't just sending messages. They were creating cognitive ecosystems, complex narrative environments that could fundamentally alter perception. In Tokyo, a collective of game designers, neuroscientists, and artificial intelligence experts developed what they called narrative viruses, communication patterns that could subtly alter cognitive processing. These weren't propaganda or misinformation. They were carefully constructed experiential landscapes that challenged fundamental assumptions about existence. Captain Krelax and the Zorn leadership experienced something unprecedented. Their collective consciousness, designed to be perfectly rational and predictable, began to encounter narrative patterns that defied their computational models. Each transmission was a puzzle, a challenge, a moment of existential questioning that rippled through their collective intelligence. The human team discovered that the Zorn's greatest weakness wasn't technological. It was their inability to comprehend individual experience. Their collective consciousness was so tightly regulated that the concept of individual perspective was almost inconceivable. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo's team developed what they called empathy bombs, communication sequences that introduced complex emotional narratives directly into the Zorn's collective communication networks. These weren't attacks in the traditional sense. They were cognitive disruptions that challenged the very foundation of the Zorn's understanding of existence. In the underground research facilities, artists worked alongside quantum physicists. A ballet choreographer developed movement sequences that could be translated into quantum communication signatures. A jazz musician created improvisational communication patterns that introduced unpredictability into the Zorn's computational models. The global network of resistance had become a living, breathing cognitive ecosystem. Information flowed like water, changing shape, adapting, finding paths of least resistance. Rashid Khan's communication network was no longer just a method of sharing information. It had become a collective consciousness, a distributed intelligence that could think, adapt, and respond faster than any centralized system. The Zorn had come expecting a linear conflict. Instead, they encountered a species that could transform conflict into a form of collective creativity. As the psychological warfare team continued their work, they realized something profound. This wasn't just a method of resistance. It was a new way of understanding intelligence itself, a glimpse into a form of communication that transcended traditional boundaries of language, technology, and consciousness. Humanity wasn't just fighting an invasion. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of cosmic communication, and they were just getting started. The final battle wasn't a moment. It was a process of transformation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the epicenter of a quantum nexus that defied every conventional understanding of space, time, and conflict. The quantum disruptor had evolved from a mere weapon into something far more complex, a bridge between fundamentally different forms of existence. In the moments before the ultimate confrontation, humanity's collective effort manifested in ways no one could have predicted. The research stations scattered across the globe weren't just communication points. They were quantum resonance chambers that transformed human collective consciousness into a living, adaptive weapon. Captain Rashid Khan's global communication network had become something beyond technology. It was a living neural network that connected human minds across continents, cultures, and individual experiences. Each node was a consciousness, each connection a potential point of quantum intervention. The Zorn command ship hung in orbit, its massive crystalline structure a testament to technological superiority. But superiority was about to be redefined. Dr. Yuki Tanaka's neural mapping research reached its culmination. The team had discovered that human consciousness wasn't just an electrical phenomenon. It was a quantum entanglement system far more complex than any alien technology could comprehend. "We're not fighting," Yuki explained to her team in the final moments. "We're communicating on a level they can't understand." The quantum resonance began not with a weapon, but with a story. Elder Maria Quisp, connected to research stations across the globe, began to weave a narrative. It wasn't a transmission in any traditional sense. It was a quantum narrative that carried the collective experiences of humanity. Millions of individual stories, moments of struggle, of love, of survival, compressed into a quantum communication signature that rippled through the fabric of space-time. In the underground facilities of the Atacama Desert, Dr. Amira Hassan oversaw the final coordination. This wasn't a military operation. It was a global ritual of collective becoming. Artists, scientists, engineers, and survivors from every corner of the planet contributed to a living, breathing quantum communication. Each individual became a node in a massive distributed consciousness that was about to challenge the very foundations of the Zorn's understanding of existence. The first indication of the attack came not as a destructive pulse, but as a profound cognitive dissonance that spread through the Zorn's collective consciousness. Captain Krelax experienced something unprecedented. The human communication wasn't an attack, it was an invitation. an invitation to understand, to experience, to perceive existence in a way that transcended the Zorn's rigid computational understanding of the universe. Quantum entanglement points began to emerge across the alien fleet, but these weren't points of destruction. They were points of connection. Entire sections of the Zorn technology began to resonate with human consciousness, creating bridges of understanding that defied every known law of physics. The quantum narrative carried by Elder Maria Quispe contained the entire human experience. Moments of profound suffering, of unexpected joy, of resilience that defied computational prediction. Each story was a quantum packet that challenged the Zorn's fundamental understanding of individual experience. Mahira Khan's work on cognitive translation reached its peak. The transmission wasn't just a message. It was a living, breathing experience that could be perceived simultaneously as sound, color, emotion, and pure information. The Zorn command ship began to transform. Its crystalline structure started to resonate with human consciousness, creating impossible geometries that merged technological complexity with living experience. Dr. Carlos Rodriguez's work on human physiological adaptation became critical. The quantum transmission carried not just information, but a fundamental reimagining of biological potential. It was an invitation to evolution, to a form of existence that transcended technological limitations. As the final moments approached, the distinction between weapon and communication, between conflict and understanding, began to dissolve. The Zorn hadn't been defeated. They had been invited to a fundamental transformation of consciousness. Humanity hadn't just survived an invasion. They had initiated first contact on their own terms. And the universe would never be the same again. The silence after the encounter was more profound than any sound humanity had ever known. 3 years had passed since the quantum convergence, and the world was unrecognizable. Cities weren't rebuilt. They were reimagined. The global infrastructure that emerged wasn't just about survival, but about a fundamental reimagining of human potential. Dr. Amira Hassan now led the Interstellar Dialogue Institute, an organization that defied every traditional concept of diplomatic relations. It wasn't a government agency or a research center. It was a living network of human potential, constantly evolving, constantly reaching outward. The remnants of Zorn technology that remained after the encounter became something entirely unexpected. In research facilities from Nairobi to Buenos Aires, scientists discovered that the alien technology wasn't just advanced, it was alive in a way that blurred the lines between biological and technological systems. Dr. Carlos Rodriguez's medical research had taken a revolutionary turn. The quantum communication experience during the invasion had fundamentally altered human physiological potential. Children born after the encounter displayed cognitive capabilities that would have been considered impossible just a decade earlier. They didn't just think differently. They perceived reality in multidimensional ways that challenged every existing scientific paradigm. In the Australian outback, a new type of educational system had emerged. Traditional schools were replaced by adaptive learning ecosystems where knowledge flowed like water, where students were as much teachers as learners. Jack Mulligan, once a mining engineer, now led a global education initiative that treated learning as a collective evolutionary process. The global communication network that Rashid Khan had helped develop had transformed into something far beyond a technological infrastructure. It was a living, breathing collective consciousness, a distributed intelligence that connected human experiences across previously unimaginable distances. Elder Maria Quispe spent her days documenting what she called the Great Transformation. Indigenous knowledge systems that had been marginalized for centuries were now at the forefront of understanding human potential. The wisdom of generations, once dismissed as mystical, was now recognized as a sophisticated understanding of cosmic interconnectedness. In orbit, the partially preserved Zorn command ship served as a testament to the encounter. It wasn't a trophy of war, but a living museum of first contact, a constant reminder of the moment humanity had reimagined its place in the universe. Mahira Khan's research into cognitive translation had become a new field of study. What was once considered a niche area of neuroscience was now crucial to understanding interspecies communication. Schools taught children multiple forms of perception, not just languages, but ways of experiencing reality itself. The global economy had been completely restructured. Traditional concepts of currency, ownership, and resources had dissolved. Value was now measured in collective potential, in the ability to solve complex challenges, in the capacity for empathy and understanding. Dr. Yuki Tanaka's neural mapping research had revealed something profound. Human consciousness wasn't limited to individual brains. It was a quantum field that could extend far beyond physical boundaries. The line between individual and collective experience had become beautifully blurred. Satellite networks that once monitored potential threats now served as cosmic listening posts. Humanity had become the universe's most unexpected diplomats, a species that had transformed an invasion into an invitation for mutual understanding. The artists who had been critical during the psychological warfare efforts now led global cultural initiatives. They weren't just creating art. They were developing new languages of experience, new ways of perceiving and sharing consciousness. Dr. Elena Rodriguez spent her days working on what she called quantum dialogue protocols, communication systems that could potentially bridge understanding with other forms of intelligence, should they exist in the universe. Humanity had not just survived, they had evolved. The Zorn encounter was no longer seen as an invasion, but as a profound moment of cosmic awakening. Every aspect of human civilization, from education and healthcare to technology and culture, had been fundamentally reimagined. As new generations looked to the stars, they didn't see potential threats. They saw potential conversations. The universe was listening, and humanity was ready to speak.